At 5:45 a.m., Lucas Carter discovered an abandoned car seat behind Coffee Corner's dumpster. Inside, a 6-month-old baby girl cried with desperate hunger. No parent in sight, no explanation. Just a helpless infant left in the Connecticut cold. Lucas bought formula from the vending machine and cradled the stranger's child, whispering soft reassurances as she finally quieted. 30 minutes later, a black McLaren pulled into the empty lot. The woman who emerged moved like money, but dressed like she was running from something. Her designer clothes couldn't hide the terror in her eyes as she spotted her missing daughter through the window. But when Melody Ashford stepped inside and reached for Hope, the baby did something that defied all logic. She turned away from her own mother and reached desperately back toward the carpenter who'd fed her. The coffee shop's bell chimed as Melody pushed through the door, her breath forming small clouds in the morning chill. Her hands trembled as she approached the corner table where Lucas sat with Hope nestled against his chest. The baby's tiny fingers clutched his worn flannel shirt, her breathing soft and even. Lucas looked up, his brown eyes cautious but kind, taking in Melody's expensive jeans and the way she held herself like someone accustomed to being in control. Yet her face told a different story, raw panic barely contained beneath a mask of composure. "Excuse me." Melody's voice cracked slightly. "I think that's my daughter." Lucas shifted Hope protectively, studying the woman before him. Something about her seemed familiar, though he couldn't place what. The baby stirred at the sound of Melody's voice but didn't wake, her small fist tightening around Lucas's shirt. "Your daughter?" he repeated quietly, mindful not to disturb Hope's sleep. "How did she end up behind the dumpster at 6 a.m.? Melody pulled out her phone with shaking fingers, scrolling through dozens of photos. Hope in a designer nursery, Hope laughing in someone's arms, Hope wearing tiny outfits that cost more than Lucas made in a week. The birthmark on Hope's left wrist was unmistakable, a small heart-shaped mark that matched the sleeping baby perfectly. "She was taken from my house 3 hours ago," Melody whispered, her voice barely audible. "Someone left my bedroom window open. No signs of forced entry. No ransom demand." She showed Lucas her phone screen displaying a single text message from an unknown number. "Coffee Corner, Millbrook, 6 a.m. Come alone if you want to see her again." Lucas read the message twice, his jaw tightening. "You came here based on an anonymous text, without calling the police?" Melody's laugh held no humor. "The police wouldn't understand the complexities of my situation." The way she said complexities suggested layers of meaning Lucas couldn't begin to untangle. Hope began to stir, making soft cooing sounds as she blinked up at Lucas. When Melody reached for her daughter, Hope's face crumpled and she began to cry, turning away from her mother's outstretched arms. The rejection hit Melody like a physical blow, her face paling as Hope reached desperately for Lucas instead. "She's never done that before," Melody said, her voice hollow with shock. "Hope has always been attached to me. She won't even stay with babysitters." Lucas gently shifted Hope back into his arms, and the crying stopped immediately. The baby's blue eyes fixed on his face with an intensity that seemed impossible for someone so young. "What's your name?" Lucas asked, though something told him he already knew the answer would be significant. "Melody Adams," she replied quickly, then caught herself. "I mean, Melody Ashford." The name hit Lucas like a thunderbolt. Ashford. He'd heard that name every day for 6 years of his childhood, whispered with love and longing by the woman who'd raised him after his father died. Margaret Carter, his mother, had worked for the Ashford family as a nanny. She'd spoken often of a little girl named Melody, the child she'd had to leave behind when the family decided she was too attached to her charge. Lucas stared at Melody with new recognition, seeing past the expensive clothes and polished exterior to the lonely child his mother had described. "Margaret Carter was your nanny," he said, not asking but stating a fact. Melody's composure finally cracked completely. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she nodded, her hand flying to her mouth. "Maggie," she whispered, "you're Lucas. You're her son." The pieces clicked into place with devastating clarity. Margaret had shown him pictures of young Melody baking cookies, building blanket forts, laughing in the garden. His mother had loved this child as if she were her own daughter, and the forced separation had broken her heart. "She talked about you every day until she died," Lucas said softly, his own eyes glistening. "Said you were the sweetest little girl she'd ever known, worried about you constantly after the Ashfords sent you away to boarding school." Melody sobbed openly now, years of suppressed grief pouring out. "I looked for her everywhere after I took over the company. Hired private investigators. I never found her." Lucas's throat tightened. "She remarried, became Margaret Henderson. Died 2 years ago in a car accident, same night my wife Anna was killed." The shared loss hung between them like a bridge built from sorrow and love. Hope seemed to sense the emotional shift, a tiny hand reaching up to touch Lucas's face as if offering comfort. "She knows," Melody said wonderingly, wiping her tears. "Somehow Hope knows about the connection." Before Lucas could respond, his phone rang. The caller ID showed unknown number. He answered cautiously, putting it on speaker. "Mr. Carter?" The voice was smooth, professional, and immediately set Lucas on edge. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Melody went rigid, recognition flashing across her face. "Who is this?" Lucas demanded. "Richard Blackwood, Chief Financial Officer of Ashford Industries. And you, sir, are harboring stolen property." The accusation hung in the air like smoke from a fire that threatened to consume everything. Richard's voice continued with practiced authority. "Ms. Ashford has been under considerable stress lately, making erratic decisions. The board has growing concerns about her mental stability, particularly regarding her fitness as a mother." Melody's hands clenched into fists, her whole body vibrating with suppressed rage. "That baby was removed from an unsafe environment for her own protection," Richard continued. "We simply need Ms. Ashford to undergo a brief evaluation before Hope can be returned to appropriate care." The words appropriate care carried a weight of threat that made Lucas's blood run cold. "What kind of evaluation?" Lucas asked, though he suspected he already knew. "A simple psychiatric assessment. Nothing invasive, just to ensure she's capable of making sound decisions regarding corporate leadership and child welfare." Richard's tone suggested reasonableness, but the underlying menace was unmistakable. "Ms. Ashford has been under tremendous pressure since inheriting the company. Paranoid delusions about board members, reckless security decisions, unstable personal relationships." Each accusation felt like a calculated blow designed to paint Melody as unfit. The board simply wants what's best for both the company and Little Hope. Melody found her voice, steel threading through the emotion. "The board wants control, Richard. This has nothing to do with Hope's welfare and everything to do with your son Connor gaining access to my shareholdings through forced marriage." The admission stunned Lucas. Forced marriage? What century were these people living in? Now, Melody." Richard's voice took on a patronizing tone that made Lucas want to reach through the phone and shake him. "Connor is a fine young man who could provide stability for both you and Hope. The board simply believes a 2-parent household would be more appropriate for raising the future heir to Ashford Industries." Lucas looked at Hope, sleeping peacefully in his arms, oblivious to the corporate machinations swirling around her young life. "And if Ms. Ashford refuses this arrangement?" he asked. then the board will have no choice but to vote for new leadership. Someone more stable, more traditional, someone who understands that personal feelings cannot supersede corporate responsibility. The threat was crystal clear: marry Connor or lose everything. Of course, such a decision would also trigger custody proceedings. Unstable mothers often lose custody to more suitable guardians. The casual cruelty in Richard's voice made Lucas sick. "You can't force someone into marriage," Lucas said, though even as he spoke, he realized how naive that sounded to people who moved billions of dollars with a phone call. "We're not forcing anything," Richard replied smoothly, simply presenting options. Ms. Ashford is free to choose: accept Connor's proposal and maintain her position, or face the consequences of continued instability. The sound of car engines outside made Lucas glance toward the window. 3 black sedans had pulled into the parking lot, their tinted windows hiding whoever sat inside. "I trust you'll make the right decision, Ms. Ashford. For hope's sake." The phone went dead, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. Melody stared at the approaching vehicles, her face a mask of determination mixed with terror. "They found us faster than I expected," she said quietly. "They've been tracking my car." Lucas counted at least 6 men emerging from the sedans, all wearing expensive suits that did nothing to hide their predatory movements. "These aren't board members," he observed grimly. "Private security. Richard doesn't take chances with opposition." Melody kissed Hope's forehead gently, her eyes never leaving the approaching men. "I won't let them take her. I won't marry Connor, and I sure as hell won't let them declare me unfit. Then we need to leave. Now." Lucas stood carefully, cradling Hope against his chest. The baby remained remarkably calm, as if she trusted him completely to keep her safe. "My truck is parked behind the building. We can slip out the back while they're focused on the front entrance." Melody nodded, gathering the diaper bag she'd brought in her frantic rush to find her daughter. "Where can we go that they won't find us?" The question hung heavy with desperation. Lucas thought of his workshop, isolated on 5 acres outside town. But Richard's people were clearly professional, and nowhere would be safe for long. "I know someone who might help," Lucas said, leading Melody toward the coffee shop's rear exit. "Martha Henderson. She was my mother-in-law, Anna's mum. Lives on a farm about 10 minutes from here." The back door opened with a soft creak, revealing the early morning mist that clung to the trees behind the building. Lucas's pickup truck sat where he'd left it, battered but reliable. "Will she help strangers?" Melody asked as they hurried across the gravel. "She'll help family," Lucas replied, opening the passenger door for her. "And my mother always said you were family, even when the Ashfords tried to erase that connection." The truck's engine turned over with a reassuring rumble, and Lucas pulled away from Coffee Corner just as the suited men reached the front entrance. In the rearview mirror, he watched them spread out, some entering the shop, while others began examining the vehicles in the parking lot. "They'll figure out we left within minutes," Melody said, bouncing Hope gently as the baby began to fuss. "The McLaren's GPS will show them exactly where I've been." Lucas took a winding route through Millbrook's back roads, using his knowledge of the area to avoid main thoroughfares. "We'll deal with that when we get to Martha's. Right now, we need to understand exactly what we're up against." Martha Henderson's farmhouse appeared through the morning mist like a sanctuary from another era. The 80-year-old woman met them at the kitchen door, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun and her eyes sharp with intelligence despite her age. "Lucas, dear," she said, immediately taking in the unusual circumstances of his early morning visit. "What's all this about?" Lucas quickly explained the situation, while Martha bustled around her kitchen, preparing coffee and setting out homemade muffins as if harboring fugitives was an everyday occurrence. When he mentioned Melody's full name, Martha's hand stilled on the coffee pot. "Melody Ashford," Martha repeated slowly. "Margaret's little girl." She turned to study Melody with new interest, her weathered hands reaching out to cup the younger woman's face gently. "Oh, sweetheart. Margaret talked about you constantly. Showed me pictures, told me stories. She never stopped loving you, you know?" Melody broke down again, this time allowing herself to be comforted by the woman who had been Margaret's friend and confidant. "She left something for you," Martha continued, disappearing into the back bedroom. She returned with a wooden box, worn smooth by years of handling. "Margaret made me promise to give this to you if you ever came looking for her." Inside the box lay dozens of letters, all addressed to Melody, but never sent. Years' worth of thoughts, memories, and love that Margaret had poured onto paper but could never deliver. She was afraid the Ashfords would have her arrested for harassment if she tried to contact you directly. Martha explained, but she never stopped hoping that someday, somehow, you'd find your way back to each other. Melody clutched the letters to her chest, finally understanding that she hadn't been forgotten or abandoned. Margaret had loved her right up until the end, even if she couldn't express it directly. The sound of vehicles approaching made everyone freeze. Martha peered through the kitchen curtains, her expression grim. 3 cars, government plates. Lucas moved to the window, recognizing the same black sedans from Coffee Corner. "They work fast." Martha straightened her shoulders with the determination of someone who'd raised 5 children and buried 2 husbands. "You two take Hope and go out the back. There's a root cellar behind the barn. Anna used to hide there when she was little and got into trouble." She smoothed her apron and checked her reflection in the kitchen window. "I'll handle these, gentlemen." Lucas led Melody and Hope through Martha's garden to the old barn, its weathered wood silvered by decades of Connecticut weather. The root cellar was exactly where Martha had indicated, its heavy wooden door almost hidden beneath overgrown vines. Inside, the space was cool and dry, lined with shelves that still held canning jars from Martha's more prolific gardening years. They could hear voices from the farmhouse, Martha's tone polite but firm as she dealt with their pursuers. "She's tougher than she looks," Lucas whispered, settling Hope more comfortably in his arms. The baby had been remarkably quiet throughout their escape, as if she understood the need for silence. "Lucas," Melody said quietly, her voice barely audible in the confined space. "I need to tell you something about Hope's father." The admission hung between them like a loaded weapon. Lucas had wondered about Hope's parentage, but hadn't wanted to pry into what was clearly a sensitive subject. "He wasn't someone I chose," Melody continued, her words carefully measured. "The board arranged encounters with suitable candidates. Connor wasn't the first son of a board member they tried to set me up with." The implications of her words hit Lucas like a physical blow. They hadn't just been pressuring her to marry, they'd been trying to breed her like livestock. Hope was conceived during one of those arranged dates. Her biological father doesn't even know she exists. Melody's voice broke slightly. "I've been raising her alone, protecting her from people who see her as nothing more than a vessel for controlling Ashford Industries stock." Lucas felt a surge of protective rage on behalf of both Melody and Hope. These people had treated them like property, manipulating their lives with the casual cruelty of those who believed money justified any action. "That's why Richard is so desperate to force this marriage with Connor. If I marry within the approved family circle, it legitimizes their control over both me and Hope." The voices from the farmhouse grew more insistent, though Martha's responses remained maddeningly polite and unhelpful. "Haven't seen hide nor hair of any young folks this morning." Her voice drifted clearly through the morning air. "But you're welcome to look around if you think it's necessary." Lucas smiled grimly. Martha was buying them time while making it clear she wasn't intimidated by men in expensive suits. "We need a plan," he whispered to Melody. "Running from farm to farm isn't sustainable. They have resources we can't match. Melody nodded, her mind clearly working through possibilities. There might be a way to turn this around, but it would require taking a significant risk. What kind of risk? Lucas asked, though something in Melody's expression told him he might not like the answer. I've been working with the FBI for the past 3 months. Financial crimes investigation into Richard's activities. The revelation stunned Lucas. He'd assumed Melody was fighting this battle alone, but she'd been building a case against her tormentors. Agent Sarah Chen has been helping me document the corruption, the forced marriage attempts, the threats against Hope. Melody pulled out a different phone, one Lucas hadn't seen before. This is a secure line. If I call her now, she might be able to coordinate with us. Coordinate what exactly? A sting operation. Get Richard on record making direct threats about Hope's custody and my forced marriage to Connor. The plan was audacious and dangerous, but Lucas could see the logic. If they could prove Richard's criminal intent, it would neutralize his power over Melody and Hope. What would that require from us? Melody's smile held no warmth. It would require me to pretend to surrender, to call Richard and agree to his terms while Agent Chen records everything. The risks were enormous. If the plan failed, Melody could lose everything, including Hope. The sound of car doors slamming indicated that the search of Martha's property had concluded unsuccessfully. Footsteps crunched on gravel as the vehicles departed, leaving blessed silence in their wake. Lucas waited several more minutes before carefully opening the root cellar door. Martha appeared almost immediately, her face flushed with indignation. "Rude men," she declared firmly, "demanding to search my property without so much as a please or thank you. I told them they were welcome to look, but I also told them exactly what I thought of people who bully young mothers." Her eyes sparkled with righteous anger. "They're gone for now," Martha continued, leading them back towards the farmhouse. "But they'll be back with proper warrants if they think you're here. We need a better plan than hide and seek." Lucas filled Martha in on Melody's FBI connection and the proposed sting operation. The older woman listened intently, her sharp mind clearly working through the implications. "It's risky," she concluded, "but sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. Margaret would have approved. She never backed down from bullies, no matter how much money they had." The mention of his mother strengthened Lucas's resolve. Margaret had protected Melody once. Now it was his turn. Melody dialed Agent Chen's secure number, putting the call on speaker so everyone could hear. "Agent Chen, it's Melody. We have a situation that's escalated beyond what we discussed." Chen's voice came through clearly, professional but concerned. "Are you safe? We've been monitoring unusual activity on Richard Blackwood's communications since early this morning." The confirmation that the FBI was already tracking Richard gave everyone hope that they weren't as alone as they'd feared. "He's made direct threats about custody and forced marriage. We have it recorded, but we need more explicit evidence for a solid case." "What are you proposing?" Agent Chen asked. "A controlled surrender. I call Richard, agree to his terms, get him to spell out exactly what he's planning while you record everything." Silence stretched for several moments as Chen considered the proposal. "It's dangerous, Ms. Ashford. If Richard suspects a setup, he could disappear the evidence and leave you with no recourse." The weight of the decision pressed down on all of them. "But," Chen continued, "if we can get him to explicitly threaten custody removal and detail the forced marriage scheme, we'd have enough for multiple felony charges." "I'll do it," Melody said firmly. "Hope deserves a life free from this manipulation. If there's a chance to end this permanently, I have to take it." Lucas reached over and squeezed her hand, silently offering his support. The connection between them felt natural, as if Margaret's love had built a bridge across the years that brought them together when they needed each other most. "Agent Chen, how long would you need to set up the recording equipment?" "We can have a team in position within 2 hours. But, Ms. Ashford, once we start this, there's no backing out. Richard will either be arrested or he'll escalate beyond anything we've seen so far. The next hour passed in tense preparation. Agent Chen's team arrived in unmarked vehicles, setting up sophisticated recording equipment while briefing Melody on exactly what language they needed Richard to use for a solid prosecution. Lucas found himself pacing Martha's kitchen, Hope still contentedly settled in his arms. The baby seemed oblivious to the danger swirling around her, more interested in grabbing at Lucas's shirt buttons than the federal agents transforming the farmhouse into a command center. "She trusts you completely," Melody observed, watching the interaction between Lucas and her daughter. "I've never seen her so calm with anyone except me. Maybe she remembers," Lucas said softly. "Some genetic memory of the connection between our families." It sounded fanciful, but there was no other explanation for Hope's immediate acceptance of him. "My mother always believed that love leaves marks that last beyond individual lifetimes. Maybe Hope recognizes something in me that came from Margaret's love for you." The idea brought comfort to both of them as they faced the uncertainty ahead. Agent Chen approached with final instructions, her expression grave but determined. "Ms. Ashford, remember that we need Richard to explicitly state his intentions regarding custody manipulation and forced marriage. Don't lead him. Let him incriminate himself." Melody took a deep breath and dialed Richard's number. He answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting for her call. "Melody, dear, I trust you've had time to consider your options." His voice carried the satisfied tone of someone who believed he'd already won. "I want to discuss terms," Melody said, her voice carefully neutral. "Excellent. I knew you'd see reason eventually. Connor is waiting at the Ashford estate. We can have a simple ceremony this afternoon." The casual way he discussed arranging her life like a business transaction made Lucas's jaw clench with suppressed anger. "What guarantees do I have regarding Hope's custody?" Melody asked, following Agent Chen's coaching. "Oh, my dear, Hope will be beautifully cared for. Connor understands the importance of proper child rearing. Of course, given your recent instability, it might be best if Hope spent most of her time with more suitable caregivers initially." Richard's voice carried false sympathy that fooled no one. "Just until you've proven you can handle the responsibilities of marriage and motherhood without these episodes of erratic behavior." The trap was closing, with Richard walking directly into it. "And if I refuse the marriage?" Melody pressed, giving him rope to hang himself. "Well, that would be unfortunate. The board would have no choice but to remove you from leadership due to mental incompetence. And of course, Child Protective Services would need to be involved. A mother who abandons her infant behind dumpsters clearly needs intervention." Richard's voice hardened with each word, the velvet glove coming off to reveal the iron fist beneath. "But let's not discuss such unpleasant possibilities. Simply say yes to Connor, and all these problems disappear." Agent Chen gave Melody a thumbs up. They had enough to arrest Richard on multiple charges. But Melody wasn't finished. "What about the board members who've been helping you? Will they face any consequences?" Richard laughed, the sound ugly with arrogance. "My dear girl, they've been compensated very well for their cooperation. Offshore accounts, real estate investments, even some gambling debts that mysteriously disappeared. When you have enough money, conscience becomes remarkably flexible." He was detailing a conspiracy that reached far beyond simple corporate maneuvering into outright bribery and corruption. "And the FBI investigation?" Melody asked, playing her final card. For the first time, Richard's confidence wavered. "What FBI investigation?" "The one that's been recording this entire conversation," Agent Chen announced, stepping into the room as her team moved to arrest Richard's associates. The silence that followed was deafening. When Richard finally spoke, his voice was stripped of all pretense. "You clever little bitch! You think you've won?" His mask had finally slipped completely, revealing the monster beneath. "Even if you arrest me, there are others. This doesn't end with one man. Actually, it does," Agent Chen replied, calmly. "We've been monitoring your associates for months. Arrests are being made as we speak." The sound of sirens in the distance confirmed her words. Richard's criminal empire was crumbling in real time, brought down by his own arrogance and greed. "Mr. Blackwood, you're under arrest for conspiracy, extortion, attempted kidnapping, and violation of federal racketeering statutes." The formal charges rang out like funeral bells for his ambitions. "You have the right to remain silent, though I doubt you'll exercise that right given how much you've enjoyed talking." As federal agents led Richard away in handcuffs, the farmhouse erupted in a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Melody collapsed into a kitchen chair, the weight of months of fear and planning finally lifting from her shoulders. Hope began to fuss, picking up on the emotional energy around her, and Lucas instinctively began bouncing her gently. "It's over," Melody said wonderingly. "It's actually over?" Agent Chen smiled as she packed up the recording equipment. "The legal proceedings will take time, but yes, the immediate threat is neutralized. The board will almost certainly ask you to resume full leadership once they realize how many of them are facing federal charges." Martha busied herself making a celebration lunch, her practical nature asserting itself in the face of all the drama. "You'll stay for dinner," she announced, not asking but informing. "Both of you. And that baby needs proper feeding and a good nap." Lucas found himself smiling at Martha's matter-of-fact approach to their extraordinary circumstances. Some things, like a grandmother's concern for a baby's well-being, remained constant regardless of corporate conspiracies and federal investigations. "I'd like that," Melody said softly. "I'd like to learn more about Margaret's life here, about the family that loved her." The afternoon passed in a haze of normalcy that felt almost surreal after the morning's chaos. Hope napped peacefully in a makeshift crib that Martha constructed from laundry baskets and soft blankets. Lucas and Melody sat on the front porch, sharing stories about Margaret and gradually filling in the gaps that 20 years of separation had created. "She kept every drawing you ever made for her," Lucas revealed. "Had them in a special box she called her Melody Memories. Even after you were sent away, she'd add things, newspaper clippings about your achievements, photos she found online when you became CEO." Tears slipped down Melody's cheeks as she realized the depth of Margaret's continued love. "I thought she'd forgotten me. The Ashfords told me she'd moved on, found a real family to replace me." The cruelty of that lie was just one more item on the long list of ways the board had manipulated her life. "She never forgot," Lucas assured her. "Anna used to joke that I had a mysterious sister named Melody who lived in my mother's heart. She wasn't wrong. In every way that mattered, you were her daughter." The validation healed wounds that Melody hadn't even realized were still bleeding. As evening approached, Agent Chen returned with updates on the arrests. 17 board members are in custody, along with Richard and his security team. We found evidence of corruption going back over a decade. The scope of the conspiracy was staggering. Your company stock should recover quickly once the market realizes the criminal elements have been removed. You'll have full control of Ashford Industries within the week. For the first time in months, Melody's future looked bright and unencumbered. "What about Connor?" she asked, completely cooperative. "Turns out he was as much a victim of his father's schemes as you were. He's already engaged to someone he actually loves." The revelation that Connor had been trapped in the same web of family manipulation added another layer to the tragedy Richard had orchestrated. "He'll testify against his father?" Agent Chen nodded. "Already gave us a complete statement. Richard threatened to disown him if he didn't go along with the marriage scheme. Even Richard's own son had been a pawn in his larger game of power and control. The important thing now is that you and Hope are safe. The custody challenges have been withdrawn, and there's no legal basis for anyone to question your fitness as a mother. Hope woke from her nap with the perfect timing of a baby who sensed that the adults around her were finally relaxed. She immediately reached for Lucas, who had become her preferred source of comfort and entertainment. "She's going to miss you when we go back to the city," Melody said, watching their interaction with a mixture of joy and sadness. The thought of separating from Lucas felt wrong, especially now that she understood their connection through Margaret. "Maybe," Lucas said carefully. "You don't have to go back right away. The house you bought in town, you could stay there for a while. Help Hope adjust gradually." The suggestion hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility and unspoken feelings. "I've been thinking about that," Melody admitted. "The corporate world nearly destroyed my life and Hope's future. Maybe it's time to try a different approach to leadership, one that doesn't require sacrificing everything personal for business success." The idea of building a life in Millbrook, close to Lucas and Martha and the memory of Margaret, felt like coming home to a place she'd never actually lived. Ashford Industries can be managed remotely for the most part. The executives who weren't part of Richard's conspiracy are more than capable of handling day-to-day operations. Lucas felt hope blooming in his chest, a sensation he hadn't experienced since Anna's death. "Martha's been after me to expand the workshop. Says there's enough demand for custom furniture to support a proper business." The practical details of their potential future together were less important than the emotional foundation they'd discovered. "Hope seems to think she's found her second parent," Melody observed as the baby laughed at Lucas's silly faces. "She's not the only one," Lucas replied, quietly, meeting Melody's eyes with an intensity that took her breath away. Martha appeared on the porch with iced tea and a knowing smile. "Margaret would be so pleased," she said simply. She always hoped her two favorite people would find each other someday. The older woman settled into her rocking chair with the satisfaction of someone who'd witnessed love triumph over adversity. "Of course, there'll be practical matters to sort out, custody arrangements, living situations, whether you plan to make this official." Her direct approach to sensitive topics was refreshing after months of corporate doublespeak and hidden agendas. "We're taking it one day at a time," Melody said, but her smile suggested she was open to whatever the future might bring. Lucas reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. Hope clapped her approval from Lucas's lap, as if she understood that this moment represented the foundation of her real family. The sun was setting over Martha's farm, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink that made everything look touched by magic. For the first time in years, the future held promise instead of threat. 6 months later, Lucas's workshop had indeed expanded into a thriving business, with Hope's playpen positioned where she could supervise all activities while learning to walk between the workbenches. Melody had revolutionized Ashford Industries' management structure, implementing family-friendly policies that prioritized work-life balance over pure profit maximization. The company's stock had reached record highs as employees responded to leadership that treated them as human beings rather than disposable resources. Hope had taken her first steps in the workshop, toddling from Melody to Lucas with the confidence of a child who knew she was surrounded by love. The custody papers had been finalized on a crisp autumn morning, with Lucas officially becoming Hope's adoptive father and Melody's co-parent. The little girl who had once been a pawn in corporate power games now had two parents who would move heaven and earth to protect her happiness. Martha had insisted on hosting the celebration dinner, declaring that Margaret's spirit was undoubtedly dancing with joy at the sight of her son and her beloved Melody raising a child together. "Some stories," she declared while serving Hope her favorite mashed bananas, "are worth waiting 20 years to reach their proper ending." Richard Blackwood was serving a 15-year federal sentence, his empire of corruption dismantled piece by piece. Connor had married his college sweetheart in a simple ceremony that emphasized love over business advantage. The Ashford Industries board now consisted of ethical executives who understood that sustainable success required treating all stakeholders with respect and dignity. Hope babbled contentedly in her high chair, occasionally reaching toward Lucas and Melody as if to make sure both her parents were still within touching distance. The workshop smelled of cedar shavings and the coffee that had become Lucas and Melody's morning ritual. Hope's laughter mixed with the sound of sanders and saws, creating a symphony of family life that felt both peaceful and productive. "She's going to be building her own furniture before she's 5, Melody predicted, watching Hope gnaw seriously on a toy hammer Lucas had carved for her. "With proper supervision," Lucas replied, his tone suggesting this conversation had become a running joke between them. As evening light filtered through the workshop windows, painting everything in warm, golden tones, Hope reached simultaneously for both her parents. They lifted her together, creating a family sandwich that made the baby giggle with pure delight. In that moment, surrounded by the tools and dreams that Lucas used to build beautiful things, Melody realized that the most beautiful thing they'd built was this, a family forged not from obligation or corporate strategy, but from love that had waited patiently across years and circumstances to finally find its home. The story that had begun with an abandoned baby and a desperate mother had become something Margaret Carter would have recognized immediately. Proof that family isn't defined by blood or legal documents, but by the willingness to choose each other day after day through whatever challenges life might bring. Hope clapped her tiny hands as if applauding their success, and in the workshop filled with the scent of wood and the sound of love, 3 people who had found each other against impossible odds settled into the quiet happiness of being exactly where they belonged.